The one good thing about the change in the media landscape over the last, 5 years is that everyone can be a content creator for you. We went from, we went from celebrities to macro influencers to now it's, micro influencers to now digital natives, especially what do they call them? Gen Alphas, right? As they're coming in to buying circles and they're entering the world of work and will start to have disposable income here in the next couple of years, they recognize that they are going to be reading content and actually getting sold to even by their friends. So the idea of learning and gaining information can come from anywhere and everywhere. So I don't think of a brand or an organization who could not reach out to at least a few of their customers and start a content feed right there in some way. It could be a really formal process, it could be a really informal process. But things like this, I think to CMOs, I would say just start by starting and see where it takes you.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I also run an agency, an incubator, and a bunch of other things, including a supplement brand. Super excited to chat with Tina Beaty, who has a unique position as a marketer in that she's the Chief Marketing Officer for SHRM, which is essentially an association. And for those folks who are not familiar with SHRM, so why don't we start with that? Who does the association serve and what's your mandate?
Yeah, so essentially we serve the entire world of work. So that is everyone from CEOs, CFOs, and CHROs who are making leadership decisions to the HR function who is seeing through strategy between workforces and AI augmentation, as well as the employees or the worker base. So it is at the intersection of all of that that SHRM really does serve.
Wow, that's like a huge mandate that you've got and a lot to cover, and a lot of constituencies there. So, given that it's multinational and not everybody's facing the same challenges based on all the legal constructs and all the operational constructs, how have you been able to sort of boil down what challenges have you faced in messaging and sort of structuring marketing around that?
Yeah, so as a global organization, we do recognize that we are not marketing just a brand, right? We are translating one mission across multiple cultures, across multiple compliance laws and economic realities, really. At the end of the day, the world of work is here to serve and ensure that communities and their economies can thrive. We have to do our ability to bring out the right conversations, the right strategy, and guide workplace leaders to work with their employee base and the tools at their disposal to make the best workplace that they can. It has to be productive. It has to thrive in revenue. It has to see through their mission. So that is our overarching unique challenge when we are going across different channels, across different countries. But at the end of the day, as a brand, we do recognize we have to be relevant and feel personal, regardless of channel, regardless of geography, regardless of zip code. That really is our biggest challenge, but it's also what kind of makes this job fun.
Yeah, it does sound super fun. And I know a lot of folks, listening and watching, may sort of still in their head, they think about HR as the hiring function, right? Because that's where they perhaps are most focused themselves as they job hunt or transition from one career, one job to another. But of
Sure.
course, there's a huge mandate that HR teams have with regards to everything from morale to benefits, and it's so all encompassing. And so as a result of that sort of all-encompassing element of human resources, fully defined, what topics are really resonating these days? And is it unique by country or is there sort of a unified set of topics that are very hot right now?
Yeah. So when you think of the world of work, folks turn to SHRM if they want to get work done. And so the topics are quite vast in that bucket, but there is one prevalent headline, and it doesn't matter industry, it doesn't matter country. It is, of course, AI.
Right.
But the focus for 2026 that we're seeing from business leaders and HR leaders is it's not just AI or how do I implement it, how do I enable my teams. It's really about the accountability. If we bring in AI, if we augment our workforce with agents or with other types of automation, how do we measure that productivity? How do we ensure we don't lose trust or culture or even control? So it's really coming down to the accountability within their AI implementation, which has kind of been an interesting shift that we're seeing this year.
Yeah, for sure. And you touched on data, right, that HR teams use. And I know that from marketing, one of your, you know, areas of passion is the use of data
Yeah.
in guiding marketing strategies and in guiding marketing. So for you, where does data become a powerful tool as you describe the ROI of marketing as a marketing professional to other senior team members, right? Because part of the marketer's job is not just, doing their marketing job, but it's getting buy-in from everybody else within the organization with data about just what the budget should be and how effectively the budget's being spent. And what's the role of data there?
Yeah, so data is powerful. It can also be overwhelming, right? You can at times feel like you have too much data. So I think the role of a CMO or anyone leading a team is to look at that data and ensure that you're not reporting out on just activities, what's
Mhm.
been done, but really use the numbers to prove out impact. What is the pipeline that you're building? What is the performance and conversion? What's the risk reduction? Those types of metrics are what the business is looking for. That is what marketing really needs to start shifting to understand so they can speak the same language as their other C-suite colleagues.
Are there any examples of sort of KPIs that you think perhaps are misaligned or maybe even misunderstood within the other C-suite groups? Because you got the CFO and the CEO, there may be a CRO that's sort of a peer to a CMO.
Yeah.
Getting those KPIs aligned or deciding what your sort of North Star is that you're following. Hey, you have any advice to fellow CMOs as regards to sort of getting that aligned?
Yeah, I think it's that word alignment. I think it truly is having a shared KPI with your head of sales, with your CRO and CFO, because marketing is a growth engine for an organization. Marketing drives revenue. And so that partnership has to truly be understood that it's not just the sales teams closing the deals. It is the MQLs that went into SQLs or even hand raisers, right? That's all done by your brand team and your marketing team. And so when marketing only reports out on that type of activity, it can get lost at those stages. That's where I think the biggest opportunity is for CMOs to share the same exact KPIs as their CRO or head of sales and report on it holistically to show how marketing drove that revenue. There's attribution models, but there is also just partnership in the approach, which I think is the strongest that you can do when you're, especially when you're going in to present to your CEO or to a board.
Yeah, that's a great point. You used some acronyms there, which are more typically used in B2B marketing, which I guess associations are more closely aligned with. But obviously, whether you're defining your audiences as ICPs or ideal customer profiles, or you're defining them as target audiences for a consumer marketing initiative, the commonality there that I see some senior marketing leaders and sometimes junior ones too struggle with is, well, we actually have more than one, right? There's really not one ICP or one target audience.
Of
Maybe
course.
it's that you're marketing to multiple ethnicities, or maybe it's purely geography, but there's definitely different needs for some of these ICPs or target audiences. So, is there sometimes a unified message that you can come up with that works for everybody, or do you actually end up having to pick some of your audiences, or should CMOs pick some of their audiences and tune messaging around those audiences?
Yeah, so I love that question, Kevin, because I think that's so important to consider. We are an audience-centric organization. I have a personal passion for ensuring that marketers understand who they're talking to and not by huge segment groups, but you really have to know the humans that you're reaching. But at the strategic level, you do have to know your audience segmentation. At SHRM, we actually have 8 audiences with 2 to 3 of them as our primary audience.
Right.
And so, yes, at some level and stage in your funnel, whether that's B2B or B2C, we do both here, you can and should customize your messaging. But I think the magic in your question there is the reminder that you should always have that level of commonality across all of your audiences because you are just one brand, right? You're one organization. And so you can create relevancy as you're starting to engage with that prospect on their journey, but you have to stand for something as an organization. You have to have a reason for being, which then gives your audience a reason to believe in you. And so that consistency needs to go across any and every audience at the segment or subsegment level. Then you can get into customization per channel, per touch point, or even by audience. But you have to know who you are and be able to say it real quick. It goes back to that classic elevator pitch.
Do you feel like sometimes CMOs and maybe the entire C-suite have to go back and sort of revisit their mission statement to get clarity on that? Or is it separate from the mission statement?
No, I think you always have to be reviewing your mission statement or your purpose statement aligned with your business objectives, and then make sure that your narrative wraps both of those things.
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, So, when CMOs are making decisions as to their marketing teams, including perhaps yourself, one of the tug of wars, and sometimes it's a philosophical thing, is the balance between internal folks and agency folks. And you can hear lots of arguments in both ways, right?
Sure.
When you have in-house folks and all the knowledge is there, and somebody gets a new job, you lose that institutional knowledge in some cases. And maybe the agencies spread it out more in a team, and then you've got agencies see more types of clients in more types of industries, and so they may learn from things that can be reapplied. But the reality is that mix probably doesn't always look the same for different kinds of organizations, and so CMOs need to work that mix through, right? So what should be in-house and what should be outsourced? So what's a good framework that a CMO should use as it relates to, insourced versus outsourced?
Yeah, I think the quickest answer is you need a little bit of both. I personally have been at an agency and in-house, and I know that combination or hybrid teams absolutely give you the best results because your core story, who you are, your narrative, and your direct business understanding and your strategy, that should come from in-house, right?
Right.
That's got to come, the call's coming from inside. But you can get so much scale, bandwidth, and just smart thinking on a dime when you have that bench for the reasons you listed, right? They're reading things that maybe your in-house team aren't. They're talking to clients across industries. If you're just in-house, you could become too myopic. And if you
Hmm.
rely only on an outsourced model, then you're missing those folks who eat, sleep, and breathe you. And so that combo, I think, is
Yeah.
always best. How many on each side? That's up for every org, depending on their budget, if they're in growth mode or survival mode. But you should always have it on both sides of the fence.
So one area I'd love to do a follow-up question on that is the social media side, and that goes, that's to say, even more broadly, owned content and other earned media content, because these things are really flowing together more than ever before, right? I mean, obviously the internal social media team is very immersed and very in touch with the internal constituents, and also in the case your case, external constituents, right? And
Mhm.
understand what are the topics that should be out there in social media, but they may miss something, and occasionally an external group may have a different point of view or see an opportunity to do something in social or within earned media. So, what are some ways to sort of shake loose new ways of creating the content, maybe new content types. We find from the SEO and now GEO perspective is that that's an area of underinvestment almost uniformly across folks when they come in and say like, what do I need to do to show up more, right? Well, let's
Right.
take a look at your competition, see what they're doing. And routinely, folks are underinvesting in at least one category right there, whether it's video content or, communities like Reddit or whatever it is. So how should CMOs think about that sort of activation and creation of content?
So I think it's about thinking of it upside down, right? What I mean by that is it can't just be content from your content team.
Okay.
And now we produce content and then we look at the channel. But we also know that we need to look at SMEs. We need to find content and great nuggets in places we wouldn't expect it. So we go directly to our in-house economics team, right? We go directly to folks who are in our membership and chapters to hear what are they seeing boots on the ground, right? You've got to go into different departments in the organization and listen and hear. You will find some amazing nuggets that become the best performing content that then supplements the content that you have in your traditional content calendars and strategy, or at least that's a mix that we have found that really works. And then you can put it into the different formats, right? You run the audit of what AEO needs versus SEO and realize, okay, we got to do more, checklists or videos, different formats. But it starts with the nugget, the insight, something that's almost proprietary to your company that only you could have that point of view on. You got to pull that forward, then figure out the format and the channel.
And not everyone has the luxury that you have, which would be to also to go to your customers, right, and engage with them for content ideas, or have them create testimonial content, which is probably a win-win for them and you. So, how, how should CMOs who are perhaps not in the most exciting categories but want to engage their customers in the co-creation of content go about that? Are there any sort of tips and tricks you've got?
Yeah, I would say every industry can be exciting as long as you have a passion for it and you're finding the customers who use you, who are loyal, right? If they're turning to you, they're telling you that they think you're exciting. And so the one good thing about the change in the media landscape over the last, 5 years is that everyone can be a content creator for you. We went from, macro influence, we went from celebrities to macro influencers to now it's, micro influencers to now digital natives, especially what do they call them? Gen Alphas, right? As they're coming in to buying circles and they're entering the world of work and will start to have disposable income here in the next couple of years, they recognize that they are going to be reading content and actually getting sold to even by their friends. So the idea of learning and gaining information can come from anywhere and everywhere. So I don't think of a brand or an organization who could not reach out to at least a few of their customers and start a content feed right there in some way. It could be a really formal process, it could be a really informal process. But things like this, I think to CMOs, I would say just start by starting and see where it takes you.
Yeah, that's great advice. One thing I noticed in a bunch of your previous LinkedIn posts and other social media is you're a big fan of sort of holistic marketing. And when we started regressing out visibility in LLMs a couple of years ago, sort of the biggest predictor of visibility in the chatbots was the fact that the marketing was holistic and it wasn't siloed.
Yeah.
So, since a holistic marketing plan is more effective not only in achieving its individual goals, but has this extra benefit of potentially improving your visibility in the future and future-proofing your AEO. How do you recommend a CMO and VPs of marketing create that holistic marketing plan?
Yeah. So I think first it's just truly as you're putting your strategy together and you're going through that review process, pause and ask yourself, is this holistic? Is this omni-channel? Is it everywhere that we need to be? And now I'm sure CMOs out there are saying, well, I would love to be everywhere, but I don't have the budget to do it. You do have to prioritize where you're going to show up, but you don't want to skip any major channel or platform that your audience is at. And then you optimize for presence. That's where you can really double down and make your budget work in a holistic plan. But once you start, you will find that the results are there and it will pay dividends.
Yeah, that's a great point. Obviously, to the extent that paid media these days is fluid, so much of it is auction-based platforms, whether it's search or social or programmatic TV or programmatic display. Media folks internally and externally are sort of thinking through every month, week, sometimes day, like
Yep.
where do I move this budget around at the margin, right? And you talked about optimizing in the channels that you need to be in, right? How do you recommend that those folks who are down in the trenches, like making the decisions at the margin, decide up at the margin? I sort of think I should take a little bit of this search budget, put it over in LinkedIn or Meta, right? Or maybe, oh no, it's the opposite. I should take some of this LinkedIn budget. It doesn't seem like it's performing. It's gotten hyper competitive for me. I'm going to move it over here, right? How should they go through the math of that?
I think it's all about documentation so that you know what you're testing, right? Because you have to be doing enough innovation that is not in your core marketing mix so that if you're tinkering over here, you can then pull it into your full media mix and have some level of understanding of what your return will be. And so it's hard to siphon off that budget and put it into an innovation or testing only capacity. But it is so worth it because then you can say, we've never been on Reddit. Or here's one that actually I've heard from a couple colleagues in industries you would not expect them to be playing in this channel, next door. All right. Most of
Yeah.
us think of that as like the place where you go to complain if a neighbor's dog pooped on your lawn. But next door now is leveling up how they can target folks. And because there's not a lot of ads there, it's actually pretty fertile ground. But you need to test a little bit on that platform or any new channel before you pull it in and really start to then compare it against your heavy hitters like your LinkedIn or your Google ads or whatever your main, especially in your paid media optimization mix. So it's hard, but siphon off for some innovation on a quarterly basis. Also give it enough time. Don't run a 1 week test and think that you have the full results to make an optimization play on. But if you can strike that balance, then you've really got something to work with that you documented what you did, how long you tested, and why you pulled it into your marketing mix or why you kept it out.
Yeah, that's great advice. I guess the final question, follow up to that is I've seen channels that were failing suddenly become powerhouses because the creative got changed, right? And so when people think about direct mail or Meta or LinkedIn or whatever, it works or it doesn't work, sometimes they forget to just try a new piece of creative. And sometimes that creative could come from an influencer or micro influencer or customer, right? And all of a sudden it's just resonating because your ability to buy the media is predicated on the creative actually resonating with the target audience. And if you forget that piece, of course it fails.
Great point. Yep.
So,
And I
yeah,
think you have to do old school audits, right? I think there's something just still really magical about printing off all of your creative, and I mean collage it against all of the walls and look at it.
yeah.
See your different ads. Is it telling a story or are you giving people whiplash because you didn't take that step back and see it as your customer? You have to see it as the human and then recognize how the algorithm is going to play with it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, storytelling is a differentiator for the brand, for every brand, pretty much. What else should marketing teams be thinking about and doing this year that perhaps they're not doing?
You got to start by starting with some of these new platforms or a channel you've never been on. There's never going to be the perfect moment to divert funding into a test and learn strategy. So you need to plan and then execute. And it might fail. That has to be okay. Actually, a little bit of failure has to be part of your plan because not every channel or platform is going to work for your audience. And so it's, art and science, right? As marketing always has been. So you got to start by starting, I think is absolutely critical. And then like we talked about with metrics, marketing has to draw a solid line and connectivity into the revenue that they are driving for the business. At the end of the day, that's why we're here. We do it through great stories, but we are here to drive revenue for companies. And so our metrics and our reporting has to prove out on that.
Awesome. Well, lots of great tips that you shared, and I appreciate you jumping on and doing the podcast for us. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Kevin. Talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.